Welcome to Sivako, Road to Avatar. My name is Shaun Alexander, and I'll be your guide to the world of Pandora and beyond. To support this show, head on over to www.patreon.com/avatarpod, where you can become a patron and gain access to exclusive content. Joining me today on this very special episode, I have a special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, hello. I'm the special guest today. My name's Rick Ives. What do you want to know? I'm a filmmaker. I have a connection to some of these movies we're going to be talking about tonight, and just excited to be here talking to you, Sean.
It's a pleasure to have you here, honestly. And I have a few questions that I always ask all my guests, a little bit to do with to keep us on the top of Avatar.
Yeah, yeah,
And the first of which, do you remember when you first saw Avatar?
yeah. The funny thing is, we're going to get it right into it because my story about watching Avatar is really great. I had just, okay, the year 2009, December. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I had just graduated college in California in November, the end of November, and everyone knew this movie was coming out, Avatar, James Cameron movie, but nobody really knows what it is other than it's like mostly animated in 3D. Um, at the same time, I had kind of lucked into a potential position. I met a guy through school, and he brought me on to this mystery job that I was going to be in sort of an intern at for a while. They were going to test me out for a couple weeks and see if I was a good fit there. So I went down, drove downtown LA with him, went in, and it was a Friday, and everyone was standing around in a circle and talking about this movie that they'd seen last night because they all had gone to the premiere and how great it was. And it took me like probably 10 minutes of them all chatting amongst themselves before I realized they were talking about Avatar, this movie that was coming out. That was a James Cameron movie. And I looked around and said, hold on a second, where am I? And I realized that the job that I was potentially getting hired at was for James Cameron's 3D company, and I knew I had to go see Avatar that night. So I took my fiance at the time. We're married now. Yeah, so I was like, we got to go see this movie Avatar, and it totally blew me away. Just the 3D and the epic scale of it, and it was 3 hours long, and it was crazy. And I started working there at that point, and I was there for 3 years, and we were all watching like every week. We're all watching the box office because it's creeping closer, closer, closer to be that number one spot, and we are all so excited to. And again, I had nothing to do with the first Avatar except that I worked there just at the right time after it came out, and that's it. That's my Avatar story. So there you go.
I mean, that's incredible anyway. The fact that you sort of like joined during the sort of like explosion of it as well, because
Yeah.
beforehand, no one really believed it would hit the heights that it did.
Right. Yeah, totally. And that it kicked off a whole 3D revolution, which I did for the next 3 years. I did 3D daily. So the difference between Jim Cameron's 3D stuff was they shot it in 3D instead of a post convert like most of the movies are today, right? And we processed all the footage that they shot every day, overnight, uh, for these 3D cameras, and it was just cool. I got to travel all over the world. I worked on a bunch of 3D movies, and man, it was just fun, right out of college. So there you go. I'll tell you this too. In January, after Abbott, oh no, I guess it would have been, when did the Academy Awards get announced?
Ooh.
February?
It would have been January, February sort of time, I guess.
Yeah. That's when I met Jim Cameron for the first time. So he came into the office and didn't even know he was coming. We were working on something else, which ended up becoming a Cirque du Soleil 3D movie called Worlds Away, that I also worked on. And he came in to look at some test footage, and we were just in the theater, me and him and my boss, and we looked at some stuff for like 15, 20 minutes. This dude, like, come on. He's nominated for Best Director. He's like the director of Titanic. He's sitting right next to me. This is so crazy. I can't believe I'm here. And didn't say a word. I was too afraid to say anything. I was trembling. I could feel my heart beating out of my chest. Uh, and they said, okay, thanks. And they walked away. And 5 seconds later, he came back in the door and he said, oh, hey, by the way, what was your name? I said, oh, huh, huh, huh. I'm Rick. Nice to meet you. Shook my hand. He was a very nice guy. He said, thanks for helping me out today. And then he left. And that might have been the only conversation we've had, although I saw him, a number of times working there. That's my James Cameron story too.
Oh
right away.
man, you know what? That's so exciting because yeah, like I love hearing sort of people's connection to obviously Avatar, but also like James Cameron as well because
Yeah,
very fascinating guy.
yeah,
And to hear
totally.
that you've worked on projects that he's worked on as well, and also the fact you got to sit in the room with him and be like, man, he's looking at the stuff I've been working on.
Yeah, totally. I know it's nerve wracking. He has kind of a reputation for being a hard A, if you know what I mean, on set,
Mm.
and tough boss and hard worker, and perfectionist, and working long hours and pushing everyone to the limit. But he was always super nice when I was around, so was never on set with him. Hopefully, he's like that, anyways. But a couple times he would come into the office. Man, I tell you, one time we were having a big demo for something. I can't even remember what it was. There was limited parking at this place. We're just in like a little building in Burbank, in California, and they needed me to run to the other office to get something, and there was no parking, and I was going to be so upset to lose my parking spot. So I put a cone in my parking spot so that it would be there when I got back. When I got back, someone had moved that cone and parked in my spot, and I was very upset. I walked in and realized it was James Cameron. He moved the cone and parked there because obviously someone saved him a parking spot. You know what I mean? And for the rest of the day, he sat at my desk, and I couldn't even use my phone because I can't go over there and be like, "Hey, excuse me, this is my desk. You can't sit here." But it was next to the conference room, so he's like posted up right there. What am I supposed to do?
That's like one of those you could unless it happened to you, you wouldn't believe someone telling you it basically.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
So yeah, let's like kind of get into sort of where your career sort of began. So you said that was your sort of first job into it. Did you
That's
go
it.
to university for
Oh
film?
yeah, so I went to school, a place that does not exist anymore. I have a bachelor's degree in art, and I mean, I guess that's like the baby step right before my career, but the big step was what I just described to you, and then from then on, it's been kind of roller coaster ride to where I am now. So there you go.
So your first sort of, I had a look through your IMDb. By the way, first
Sure.
of all, impressive stuff.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
so good to see. And your first sort of like your roles were described as a stereo correction specialist. So for those
Right.
who don't know, what would you describe? How would you describe it to them?
So that was the 3D dailies that I was doing. We didn't really know how to put a title on that at the time because that position never existed before. But really, what we did was we'd go through every night and look at the footage that they shot, and we would do stereo correction on it. So that was making the 3D more uh, beautiful to look at, I guess. They do it for a movie. You'll go through the 2 hours and you'll correct every single shot to make sure the 3D doesn't hurt your eyes. There's a lot of things that you could do wrong in 3D. Like if the two images are shifted up and down, that really hurts to look at. Or if I mean, it's hard to explain, but if the 3D is too much, that can hurt to look at. If one of the cameras was slightly twisted on its seat, that could hurt to look at. And they'll go through and fix the whole movie, but we do a real rough pass at nighttime so that the editor, the director, the producers who are all looking at dailies the next day and then for the next year throughout the edit aren't looking at 3D that is going to give them a headache. Most of the time when people complain about, oh yeah, I don't really like 3D, it doesn't work for me, it gives me a headache, probably because they went to the theater and saw a bad 3D movie.
That's honestly what I always think when I think of like people experiencing bad 3D. It is a lot to do with the theater experience more than
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
You know, none of the filmmakers go out to make a bad 3D movie.
No, of course not. But it's so precise, man. If you're shooting two cameras and one of them is even twisted like 1 to 2% for the whole day, your whole day is going to be kind of annoying to look at.
Mm.
So that's what we would avoid. We would go through and fix all that stuff, but not everyone was doing that. So it was kind of a unique position. Um, yeah, and then that's what a stereo correction specialist does. And then we'd also do so we do that on set at night when we are doing dailies. And then there were a number of times a 3D movie would come back into our office when it was getting ready to be released. So for example, Cirque du Soleil, which I um, mentioned, and then Hugo Cabret, when that came through, we did all the 3D for that one. Um, Man, there's a number of them that came through, and we would do that process much more fine tuned because this is going to be the final product before it gets released. We want the 3D to look real good, real comfortable on your eyes, that kind of thing.
Mm. And one of the films in that list is you worked on Deepsea Challenge.
Oh, DCP Challenge, yeah. So same thing. They shot that whole thing in 3D, and A lot of it was underwater. It was pretty wild that they were getting 3D cameras, deep at the bottom of the ocean. And then you've seen the movie, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and
Okay.
I'm sort of wondering how they fit 2 cameras in that sort of or like, because obviously was it 2 cameras in that space? Because obviously it's not the biggest, sub he goes down in, right?
No, it was tiny. I mean, it's big if you look at it, but the amount of space there is for a human being is so small. It's like less than a
Mm.
car. So he couldn't lay down or even stand up, or he just sat completely still for the whole trip to the bottom and then the whole trip back up to the top. In case your listeners don't know, that was the movie where he went to the bottom of the Mariana Trench and they did a National Geographic documentary for it. I'm trying to remember if the cameras they shot with were 3D or if they were post converted. I believe the one inside the sub was 2D. I think that might have been GoPro. And then the ones outside of the sub definitely were 3D because I remember vividly going through and at that depth of the ocean, the camera started fizzing, like messing up. So there was a lot of dead pixels in the image, which can
Mm.
also hurt your eyes when they're in 3D because it'll be in one eye but not the other eye. And it was all over the place because there was so much pressure on those cameras that I had to go through and paint out every single frame dead pixels for all the underwater stuff, which was probably 15 or 20 minutes of that movie. And it was excruciating to go through and paint out 100 per frame, next frame, 100 per frame, next frame. And there's 23 frames per second, and there's two eyes. So that's almost 50 frames per second for 15 minutes. That's a lot of work.
That is a process, I imagine.
By the way, I spent months on that movie, and that is the one film that I worked a lot on that stiffed me on a credit. I'm not in the credits for that movie. I don't know why.
Boo.
I know, I'm
Oh,
so
that's
upset.
oh.
To this day.
Oh dear, I've hit a sore subject.
But it's an interesting movie. Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. That one might be on Disney Plus in 2D, obviously, but it's kind
Yeah,
of cool to see all the work that went into getting them at the bottom
you
of
could
the
definitely
ocean.
find a lot of the footage on YouTube as well. I think it was so
Mm,
heavily like promoted around the time that it was happening.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, obviously your career sort of from there has sort of branched off into, well, you're working a lot with Marvel Studios lately. So how did you get first started with them?
Yeah, so the 3D stuff, if you remember, kind of died out in a lot of different reasons. Partly because I think audiences were getting tired of it, partly because they had perfected the post conversion job. So there wasn't much being shot in 3D anymore. I think maybe Ang Lee might be the only one really doing that these days. Um, and I got into dailies, just regular 2D dailies. I was living in California. I got wind of a job out in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, for a company that was starting dailies, and I ended up accepting that job. That was at Pinewood Studios. Maybe you know the name Pinewood, right? They got a couple of those over in
Yeah,
the
we got
UK.
we got
Yeah.
Pinewood over here.
So the same company, they opened one over here, and I was working for Pinewood Dailies, which was out of the UK. And our first movie was Infinity War and Endgame, and I worked on that for a year, both of those. And after that ended, I kind of jumped over to the editorial side of things, and I've been doing an assistant editor ever since for Marvel Studios. So it's been fun.
Wow, what's it like transitioning as well between the roles? Because obviously it's probably quite a once you're in, is it sort of like a case of once you're in sort of thing with people?
Yeah, a lot of it is just who you know. The actual work is not that much different. I still just sit at a computer and type, push buttons.
I think
So
I think a lot of people assume there's like a lot of different elements going on to it, but I think there is a lot of those roles as well where it is you
yeah,
kind of sitting at a screen and just having
yep.
to run through the
That's
dailies.
that's all I do. Uh, Yeah, and I mean, there's different softwares involved, and I tend to be pretty good at learning new software, which is maybe one of the reasons I do well at that kind of thing. But um, yeah, I kind of just still sit at the computer and look through footage, and it's just different now on what content I'm working on is all. But I shifted over around the time Disney Plus launched, so I've been doing a lot of the Marvel Disney Plus shows, and then a couple movies here and there within those. But it's all
Yeah,
kind of the
so
same job.
yeah, so is there any like particular of the Marvel shows that really stood out to you as like when you were working on them, there was things that you it sort of like stood out to you when you were working on being like, oh man, this is gonna like jump out to people when they see it.
That's what it was like working on Infinity War and Endgame, honestly. You just know that this movie is going to be huge. It might be the biggest movie ever, but it's not going to be out for a year. And the part I'm working out on tonight is not going to be out for 2 years because that's part two. So it's just kind of hard, to keep that perspective that, man, this is going to be so big. And look at what I'm looking at on my screen right now. Everyone in the world is wondering what's happening today, and I get to see it. That's the one that probably, is the most anticipation behind it. But I enjoy working on all of them. It's always something a little bit different. Sometimes it's magic. Sometimes it's uh, like sci-fi. Sometimes it's action movie stuff. It's always kind of different and fun to, move to a new job and see something else on the next one.
Yeah. And you've also, so through that, I guess you've kind of gained a lot more experience and met a lot of people as well who've probably like helped you in terms of what you wanted to move forward to and your current project that you've got going on.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that it is a small world, even though it's a big world. The joke on the first Avatar was that if if someone had said, "Oh yeah, I worked on Avatar," well, that wasn't special because everyone had worked on Avatar at that point. It had been in development for so long that it was more unique to not have a credit on Avatar at the time. So now that I'm sort of in that world, yeah, you start to run across the same kind of people, which is nice. I mean, it makes it a little bit easier to find the next job. But
Awesome. So yeah, your current film that you have a film currently out, which is one that you've directed yourself. So do you want
I
to
do.
tell everyone a little bit about it?
Oh, sure. Thank you. So, uh, while I was doing all this in the last 10, 15 years, I was also, I want to be an editor. So I was editing low budget features on the side as sort of my side hustle. And I had been doing 3 or 4 with this company out in California. And eventually I decided, I could probably write one of these. I have a good idea for something, a while back, and I think it might make a good feature, and we could do it for low budget. So I pitched it to them. They backed me on it. Long story short, we made it in Georgia, and it's out now for you to see. So the movie's called Solid Rock Trust. It's a bank heist movie like you've never seen before. It all takes place in a single room, but that room is not in a bank. Our main actress plays a character who has a whole bunch of mobile phones on her desk in front of her, and she's calling everyone in the bank. Each phone goes to a different person on the team. And the trick is she's doing a bunch of accents and languages, so none of the people in the bank know who she really is. And everything that you would expect to happen in a bank heist movie is still going to happen. So there's like, shootouts and cops get called and hostages in danger and double crossings and lots of surprises. And it all happens from her perspective, from sort of the woman in the chair somewhere else. And it's kind of a roller coaster ride. And I know, Shaun, that you watched it. So give me the thumbs up, thumbs down. Tell me what you thought.
Oh, it's a big thumbs up.
Oh,
I
okay.
look,
Well, thank
I
goodness.
I
Because
love
that would have
like
been awkward.
well, this is the thing. I love heists. I think honestly, heist films are like always very exciting anyway. But I love different perspectives on it. And obviously, I mean, the classic is that I think of, especially when I was watching this, was like, man, it's like Reservoir Dogs
Yeah,
sort of
Reservoir
thing, where it's
Dogs.
like
Yeah,
the sort of seeing the heist from a different perspective. And I
right, right.
think that's always such a great way to look at different stories because it's a heist film is something that has been told a lot of times.
Of
So
course. Yeah.
having a different view on it is so exciting, and I
How do
think this
you
was
improve
a lot.
on some of the ones that have already been done? Like Inside Man and Dog Day Afternoon are like
Yeah,
the heist movies. Everything that you could ever want out of one is already there. You can't do any better than that.
that's
the,
it. And
the only thing you could do is try to look at it from what you're saying, different perspective. How can we do this in a different way? That's what our goal was.
yeah, I was going to ask you actually, like, was there any particular like films or directors that really like inspired you for this film?
Well, I put as many heist movie references as I could into mine. So we referenced Dog Day Afternoon and Inside Man and Reservoir Dogs and oh shoot, I mean, there's so many. Heat is great.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, there's a bunch in there. So the other thing that I really like is I love movies that are single location movies. Every time one of those pops up, I have to watch it, and there's a couple really good ones. So Locke, maybe you've seen. That's Tom Hardy.
mm,
He's in a
love that.
car the whole time. And then there's another one called Buried, which is Ryan Reynolds. He's in a coffin for the whole movie. And those movies can be so tense, and it's kind of like a magic trick when you watch it because you think, how could this be interesting? Just a person not even moving. I mean, what is there to even watch for an hour and a half? But that's the game, is you got to squeeze as much stuff in to keep an audience engaged, and if you do it successfully, it can be really fun. So
Yeah, it really reminds me of sort of those, yeah, the magic of like when you'd go see like a one man show or something, and you'd be like,
mhm.
I've watched this for like an hour and a half. I've
Sure.
been captivated the whole time. I haven't even thought about the fact that I've only been seeing one person for like
Yeah.
the length of this, but it
you're
works. And yeah,
you're so used to seeing movies that have like sprawling casts and big locations, which is cool. I like those too. Believe me, I'm like diehard Fast and Furious fan. It never ends. But you can do it a different way, and one man shows have been happening. Like there's a long history of that. So why can't you do that as a movie either? You know, and that was part of my pitch to my cast and crew of this movie to begin with. Was we're basically just going to shoot a stage play of a one man show. And that stage happens to be an abandoned building, and we're going to make it look cinematic. But I mean, that's the idea, is it's kind of like a play. You're watching this person give a performance that's really fascinating. And there you go.
how did it feel like editing your own like work? Was it a bit of a different experience?
Oh yeah. In some ways different, in some ways the same. I'm always cursing the director for stuff I work on because I'm like, dude, how did you not get this? I need this piece. How am I supposed to make this work? And again, I still did that, except the director was me. So I had no one to be mad at except for myself. Uh, but it was kind of fun too, because I go in, on the day of shooting, kind of knowing how I'm going to put this together and shooting it in a way that I know it's going to, this is like, I know this section is going to feel like this. So we're going to shoot it like this. It's very intentional. And I know this section is going to feel this way, and we're going to shoot it this way. And it's fun to get into the edit and see it come together the way I imagined it, and in a lot of cases worked out, just like I expected.
Oh, yeah, that's all. It always feels like satisfying to know, but it works out eventually in the end.
Yeah,
It,
there's a scene in the movie where she is negotiating both sides of a conversation, so she's pretending to be a different person for each person she's talking to, and they're talking to each other, if that makes sense.
mm,
The part I'm talking about.
yeah, yeah.
And we shot that in a way that it would look like that scene out of Lord of the Rings when Gollum is talking to himself,
Mm.
and you start, you ease into it, and then soon you're like cutting it in a way that it looks like there's two different people, even though it's just her. And that was the first scene I edited because I was so excited to see if that actually worked or not, and also nervous if it didn't work. But yeah, what you're saying, it was so fun to like cut it together. Oh man, it's great. It's like, yeah, she's doing two different accents and she's talking to herself, and we get the story happening, on both sides of the conversation that we're not seeing, and it's kind of fun to see that.
Amazing, and it is a great performance. She puts in the work. That you give her so many different voices to do in this film. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, so you're from the European area. What
I'm
did you
from the
think?
UK, yeah.
Yeah, so what did you think about the different accents? Did they sell it for you?
Like, look, accents are hard.
Yeah.
I'm no expert.
Yeah.
I have one accent and it's mine. But
What
honestly, like it's one of those things where I think that, especially for like audiences, I think hearing like just that variety of accents, and it really reminds me of stuff like Killing Eve, where
Mhm.
Jodie Comer puts on like five different accents in like two sentences,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, like work like that is so incredible to me.
I love being able to see that kind of stuff, which is why I put it in this movie. But when like the first time I ever heard Tom Holland talk outside of Spider-Man, or
Mm,
first time I heard Gary Oldman's voice, his real like out of character voice, like, hold on a second. Wait, that's not how you talk at all.
mm.
It's wild when someone can do an accent that well to fool you. And I think Coco, our actress, she does it just great. All of a sudden, it looks like you're watching somebody completely different.
You know what? You just reminded me of. I always think Christian Bale's accent throws me off the most because he has a
Yes,
really thick accent,
yes,
but he
but his
has the most
American
like
is so
plain
good.
American accent.
That's
He does
right.
such a good job of like hiding it.
I know.
I could never.
They're just really great at what they do. There's a bunch of YouTube videos, like classes type thing, that will teach you how to do different accents, and the people who are professionals at it are just wild to watch. It's almost like you can't believe what you're seeing,
Yeah.
but they just do it, man. So Coco speaks like 3 or 4 languages fluently, and then she does all these accents just because she's interested, in different dialects and stuff. It was a perfect fit for this kind of thing.
I reckon her being able to speak those different languages probably instantly helps her out on the accents as well, I'm
Well, that was a
sure.
prerequisite when I was casting. I was like, you got to be able to cry and you got to be able to do different accents because that's what I need. That's what I need someone to do here. There's going to be a lot of dialogue. You're going to be acting by yourself, and I had to pitch that, all to her in advance. This is going to be different than any other thing you've made before, but it could be fun. And I had to, kind of convince her, you want to go on this ride?
So I want to bring it back to Avatar a little bit. So
Yeah.
I want to ask you a few just like general sort of questions because have you seen both Avatar and The Way of Water now?
Yes, definitely. Oh, I got
Awesome.
a good Avatar 2 story for you.
Oh yeah, throw it my way.
So I'm in Georgia now, not as much of a like cinema file location. We do make a lot, but we only have like 2 or 3 IMAXs in the whole metropolitan area. So I drove an hour to a 3D laser IMAX screening, right? And
Hmm.
I got there, buy my ticket, and the projector was broken. I was so upset. Really? It's not fixed? No, it's not going to be working today. This is the only day I can see this movie. All right, fine. Give me the regular 3D screening. Got my real D glasses, went in, sat down, upset for like, I don't know, 20 minutes, sit through all the trailers. I don't know what it's like for you, but in America, the trailers are endless. We sit through like 20, 25 minutes of trailers for every movie.
It's like 30 minutes here.
Yeah, okay. So I'm like sitting there, like growling. I don't care about all these trailers, man. I've seen them all on YouTube already. And can we just start the movie? And it starts, and that's funny. It doesn't look like it's in 3D. And I started looking around, and nobody else is wearing glasses. And I was so upset for those 25 minutes. I didn't realize I was in the wrong theater. So I walked down the little lane out the door, quick U turn into the next door, and walk into the actual screening. And I missed the first 5 minutes of the movie.
Oh dear.
So I
One
had to
of
go
those
back.
days.
I had to go back and look up what happened in the first 5 minutes. I was a little confused about what's the character who died in the first one, and now he's the main villain again, but this
Oh,
time he's an
Quaritch.
avatar. I was like so lost. This avatar looks just like that guy. Is that on purpose? Took me a while to figure out it is him. He's a clone or whatever it is. So yes, I have seen both. There you go.
Oh, I was going to ask if you got like a scene that really stands out to you from those two movies.
Good question. What do I always remember? I always from the first one, I always loved when he trains the banshee. That's what it's called, right?
Mm,
Uh, that was always when I think of Avatar. That's the scene I think of. Maybe that's on purpose because that's the the shots you always see when they're promoting it.
yeah.
Um, I really we can spoil Avatar
Oh
2
yeah,
on
go
this,
for
right?
it.
Okay. I really liked the whole boat sinking fire on fire stuff at the end there. I thought that was fantastic. And
Mm.
at a certain point when it starts going down, you think, "Oh, we're doing this again. Another sinking ship. Okay, why not?" But it's still good. It's still so good, man. You got kids in danger, and they're trying to get off. And uh, I'm, I guess I don't understand. Maybe you can tell me this, but Avatar, the Navi can hold their breath much longer than normal people. In fact, they could be not breathing underwater for a while and passed out and come up and still be okay, right?
I mean,
Have you guys talked
there's
about
definitely
that?
there's definitely like a few liberties taken. I think in some of the amount of times people are underwater,
Well,
but
what humans can they need oxygen, but they can be okay for like 30 seconds without any oxygen, you know?
yeah.
So maybe the Navi could just do like 8 minutes or something. In my head canon, that's okay. They're
I
just
mean,
aliens.
they did a lot of training because they did a lot of free diving for this film, didn't they?
Right,
So
right. Well,
I
and
think
that
that
one they're awake, but I'm saying after if you hold your breath
oh, if you're
underwater
like
long enough to pass out, you need air like in 30 seconds or else you're going to be brain dead, but maybe the Navi could just go longer than that cuz he was down there for a while,
yeah.
Sean. He was down there a while.
Yeah, I don't think we'll give them some creative liberty on that
Yeah.
one. I think, but yeah, honestly that boat sinking is so good, and Cameron's just one of those guys who clearly his experience with water is like
Right,
no one else's. So
right.
yeah,
And the
why
next
not
one's
let him do
fire,
it
right?
again?
So we're finally going to go into some new territory for Cameron because I don't know if we've
Yeah,
ever done fire stuff before. Maybe True Lies or something, but
I'm excited because we might be seeing I'm hoping we're going to see some sort of volcano or something like that. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. I also
Um,
wonder, you're wearing like a Disney Mickey Mouse shirt. I
yeah,
also wonder if they're going to start changing the parks, the Avatar stuff to match the newer movies as they come out. Because right now
yeah.
it's all based around that first one.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. I literally did my episode that's coming out. In theory, we're recording this on a Thursday. It comes out tomorrow. I'm
Oh,
doing an
okay.
episode where me and a friend talk about what we would add to the Disney parks
Yeah.
from the new movie. So,
It's tough because you kind of want to have it like up to date, but
mm,
that stuff takes so long to build and design and make it safe and all that stuff. But you can't build it too early because then you'd be spoiling the movie that's going to be coming out in the 2 years or whenever it is.
mm.
So strange. I wonder. Yeah, I wonder if they'll start putting Way of Water stuff in like sooner rather than later.
We'll see. Because especially considering there's like new ones coming out every 2 years now,
Hmm.
who knows? By the time they get the park stuff ready, it might be time for the third one. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you, Rick. Honestly, it's been so fun, and I would highly recommend everyone go check out Rick's film, Solid Rock Trust. Where can people find it?
Oh yeah, good question. So in America, it's in Tubi for free with ads. In Australia, you're on Tubi. In the UK, you have to rent it. So it's available for rental everywhere in the world on Amazon, on YouTube Movies, on Google Play. And if you're listening to this after June 2023, it will be available on YouTube for free with ads everywhere in the world. So check out those spots. Let me send you the link to in the show notes. It will be updated with all the places you can check it out and our social medias and stuff if you want to find us. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And yeah, is there any other projects you've got coming up?
I'm always working on Marvel stuff, so I can't tell you. just
Okay.
keep just keep an eye on my IMDb, and you'll know soon enough.
Yeah, I did have a little sneak peek to just see what's on your upcoming, and
Yeah, I'll
I saw
usually put something on my IMDb after I'm off the job, even if it's not out yet. But I
oh,
still
I
can't
see.
talk about that stuff. So the one even I'm on right now, I haven't even put it on there yet. But one day, I mean, that's part of the fun is you're working on stuff someone's gonna watch in a year from now.
Man, yeah, people are losing their minds in 2 years' time for something that you've already known about
Yeah,
for
that's
who
what it
knows
was
how long.
like. That's what it was like working on the Avengers movies because I knew how part two ended before part one even came out. You know,
Wow.
and at the time you didn't even know it was time travel. That was a huge secret. And I couldn't
Yeah.
even I literally couldn't say anything about that movie because everything was a spoiler. And I remember at the time thinking, I don't even know how they make a trailer for this because literally everything that you could show would be a spoiler. And if you remember, the trailer for Endgame was almost nothing. It was just Tony Stark on the spaceship saying, "We're all dead." There was nothing else.
Yeah, I do remember that sort of year period between Infinity War and Endgame, and everyone was just like the predictions people were coming
Yeah,
up with for what
yeah,
was going to happen,
totally.
and and honestly, it did. Even most people didn't even predict what actually happened by the end.
I know. They were so good about being 4 or 5 steps ahead of what everyone else could guess what to
Yeah.
expect.
Oh,
So it's wild. But yeah, Sean, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast.
yeah. Thank you so much, and yeah, hope everyone has enjoyed listening to this chat. Speak to you all again soon. Goodbye. Thank you for listening. This week's episode is dedicated to our patrons Eric Scrock and Patrick Regal. To become a patron, visit www.patreon.com/avatarpod.